So we've covered some serious ground. You know, we looked at the question: are science and faith compatible? We looked at, does God exist? Now we're going to look at what I think is the greatest challenge to Christianity, and it's a challenge that we need to take seriously. It's the problem of evil. And I'll kind of spell that out, exactly what that problem looks like as we go, but it amounts to something like, if God, why evil? And I think we've all experienced the problem of evil. You just have to live for a few years, and you'll eventually run into this challenge, right? At one time or another, you'll ask the question, if there is a God who is good and loving and powerful, why is there so much evil in this world? I mean, you could turn on the news and you would hear story after story of terrible tragedies, some so unspeakable that it's hard to even wrap our minds around. I'm just thinking of like some kind of big events that I can think of, and you probably have others as well, but man, we all remember, even the Canadians, okay, remember where we were on 9/11, at 9/11. It was like, I remember those events. I don't have a great memory when it comes to like those kind of things, but I remember where I was. In fact, I was in high school and lived close to the school, and so it was me and a bunch of my friends all kind of huddled around the TV, kind of watching these events unfold. If God exists, why 9/11? On December 14th, 2012, Adam Lanza marched into Sandy Hook Elementary School with a rifle and killed 20 elementary school kids, along with 6 teachers. If God exists, why the Sandy Hook Massacre? On Boxing Day 2004, a tsunami over 100 feet high hit the coast of Indonesia, killing over 200,000 people. In the aftermath, you could see bodies of men, women, and children floating like driftwood. If God, why killer tsunamis? Can God be called good and allow events like these to happen? Now, it's not surprising that the problem of evil has produced more atheists and agnostics and skeptics than probably any other challenge that's out there. And so the problem of evil remains a question on the minds of many people, especially, including Christians. It's not like the problem just evaporates when you become a Christian. Like, you don't ask those questions or struggle with those questions anymore. This actually was brought home to me a few years ago when I saw a video clip. And the video clip is an interview between a British broadcaster named Gay Byrne, and he's interviewing a British actor named Stephen Fry. Maybe you know the name Stephen Fry. And this series that this part of is called The Meaning of Life. Now, during the interview, Byrne, the interviewer, asked Stephen Fry, because Stephen Fry is an atheist, what Stephen Fry would say to God if he met God. So kind of like we talked about Bertrand Russell, what he would say. What would Stephen Fry say to God? And this video went viral when it came out, and it still shows up. I still see it popping up. People still sharing it, even today. Almost a decade later. So here's what he says.
Suppose what Oscar believed in as he died, in spite of your protestations, suppose it's all true, and you walk up to the pearly gates and you are confronted by God. What will Stephen Fry say to him, her, or it?
I will basically, what's known as theodicy, I think. I'll say, bone cancer in children? What's that about? How dare you? How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? That's what I'd say.
And you think you're going to get in on
No,
that?
but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to get in on his terms. They're wrong. Now, if I died and it was Pluto, Hades, and if it was the 12 Greek gods, then I would have more truck with it, because the Greeks they didn't pretend not to be human in their appetites and in their capriciousness and in their unreasonableness. They didn't present themselves as being all-seeing, all-wise, all-kind, all-beneficent. Because the God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac, utter maniac, totally selfish. We have to spend our life on our knees thanking him? What kind of God would do that? Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? You could easily have made a creation in which that didn't exist. It is simply not acceptable. So, atheism is not just about not believing there's a God, but on the assumption that there is one. What kind of God is he? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, your life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living, in my opinion.
That sure is the longest answer to that question that I ever got in this entire series.
All right. So, after hearing that, do you guys see any problems? There was no lightning bolt. That's true. That's true. What we're going to do as we kind of walk through this session is dissect a little bit about what he said, because I think there was a lot of false assumptions. There was a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of things that we can say in response to some of the things that he was saying there. To even scratch the surface on this question, I think we need to make an important clarification, okay? The problem of evil, we could kind of tease it out into two different categories, okay? What you have is the emotional problem, which we all feel, and the intellectual problem, okay? And it's really important that we keep these two things and understand them as two separate things, even though they are tied together. I mean, they often show up together when you are talking to someone wrestling with this challenge. The emotional problem is one that you probably experienced. It's not a rational challenge, but it's more of a reaction, a feeling or a reaction to the evil in the world. And so just recall a moment ago, Stephen Fry, he's asked by the broadcaster Gay Byrne, he says, suppose it's all true. Like God really does exist, okay? It's all true. And you walk up to the pearly gates and you're confronted by God. What does Stephen Fry say to God? Notice his first three words. How dare you? Does that sound like the beginning of an intellectual response or case? No, that's an emotional reaction. How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? And we're going to come back to that because I don't think God made that world initially. It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Notice, secondly, he's making a moral pronouncement. He's saying, God, that's not right. That's evil. Remember that too. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world so full of injustice and pain? This is not an intellectual challenge, okay? This objection amounts to, I don't like a God who would permit the kind of suffering and evil that he sees. So there's these two things. There's the intellectual problem, the emotional challenge. Notice that even if God exists, even if he's real, Fry wants nothing to do with him. And I actually think that's where a lot of people are coming from. I don't care if God's real. I don't want anything to do with him. Kind of a side note, I think the atheism is a concern, but I think the church has a bigger problem than atheism, and it's apatheism. And what I mean by that is atheism would be the belief that there is no God, and apatheism would be the belief that I don't care if there's a God, and I think there's a lot of people who just are apathetic. So obviously, these are two different kinds of challenges, and that they require two different kinds of responses. So if someone comes to you with an emotional challenge, it won't do any good to respond in an intellectual way. And if someone comes to you with an intellectual challenge, it won't be appropriate to respond in a way that is more emotional, okay? It's kind of like this. Imagine you're a doctor and you have a patient and you have a medical student. If they both ask you about cancer, you're going to give a different response. Like, I am not going to talk to my patient who's just been diagnosed with cancer in a way that's like hard and cold and whatever. I'm going to be more compassionate, there's going to be an appropriate response there. If the medical student is asking about cancer, well, I'm not just going to give them a big hug. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of emotional, like shoulder to cry on kind of response is going to miss the mark. They're looking for maybe facts or information or whatever. Okay, so if you can respond to the intellectual challenge, and if you just respond in such a way that is emotional, then that's going to come across as maybe superficial or something. But if you respond to the emotional stuff with just facts and arguments and evidence, that's going to come across as uncaring. So how we approach the person is really important. In fact, whenever someone asks the question about the problem of evil in like a Q&A time, especially if I'm on like a secular campus or whatever, my first question is, how have you experienced evil? So I know where you're coming from. You know, I need to know where this question's coming from. If their dad just died, then me walking through some of the stuff we're going to talk about in a minute, it's totally going to miss the mark. So, and what makes things even worse, by the way, is like I said, the intellectual and the emotional are often tied together. You experience some emotional suffering, and then you're asking kind of like the big questions, and that's often hard to tease apart. So here's what the logic of the argument looks like. So I want you to feel this. If God is all good, he would want to eliminate all the evil in the world. That's the first premise. If he's good, he wants to get rid of evil. If he's all powerful, then he could get rid of all the evil in the world. Okay? Two premises. Third premise, there is evil in the world. Here's what follows. Either God is not all good, or he's not all powerful, or maybe both. Either way, the Christian God does not exist. So this is like the logical form of the problem of evil. Now, how do we respond to this kind of challenge? And what I'm going to offer you is 4 insights. What we're not going to do in the next few minutes is answer the problem of evil, okay? Because it's not like a math question that can just be answered. You may hear what I have to say, and it may just not resonate. It may not be emotionally satisfying, and I get that completely. Because what I want to do is actually respond to this intellectual kind of argument, and then we'll kind of circle back and I'll say something about the emotional side of it. But just know that this is a question I think we all kind of wrestle with, and it's not like we're going to put a bow on this thing by the end of the session, okay? So here's like the 4 insights that kind of revolutionized how I think about this challenge. And they go like this. First, evil is something. Second, evil is not something. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second. Third, something good made evil possible. And fourth, evil is solved by someone. Okay, so the 4 things. First, we're going to do evil is something. Evil is something. Now, what I mean by that is evil exists. And by exists, I mean like it's something that exists in the world. It's real. It's real. It's not just in my head. And this shouldn't even need to be said. Like, we should all understand, everyone should agree that evil is a real thing. Stephen Fry thinks it's real. In fact, most atheists, when you push them, they make claims as if it's real. here's the thing. In order for there to be a problem of evil, there must actually be evil. So things like racism and genocide and bullying and murder and terrorism. I mean, we could list a million different examples of evil in the world. So this should be obvious, but here's why this is a significant point. Any worldview that cannot account for real evil in the world must be false, because it's just like evil is like a feature of reality. This is the world we live in. But what a lot of people haven't thought through is that there's a lot of worldviews that cannot make sense of real evil. For example, the pantheistic religions, they can't make sense of evil. They don't believe in distinctions between good and evil. In fact, the idea is you want to come to the realization that there is no distinction between the two. I actually think atheism has the same problem. I think that at least certain forms of atheism cannot account for the evil in the world. Most people realize that for there to be an objective moral law out there, there must be a moral lawgiver. So no moral lawgiver, no moral law. You get rid of it, and all you're left with is some kind of relativism. That is, a moral relativism. There is no moral truth, like objective truth. So either we all decide for ourselves what is morally right and wrong, good and evil, or cultural relativism, which says, hey, let's get together as a group and form a consensus on what we believe is right, wrong, good, and evil. Or some will argue, look, this whole idea of morality, it's actually an illusion that's kind of tricked us into thinking that morality exists, but really it's just something that evolved for our survival advantage. So just as like we evolved 5 fingers instead of 6, we evolved with the feelings that murder is wrong, or stealing is wrong, or whatever. So this is actually, many atheists will admit this. So look at Richard Dawkins in his book, River Out of Eden, and he says this: in a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. Then he says this: the universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. So in a universe in Richard Dawkins' universe, where it's just matter, that's it. There's just nature. Nothing beyond nature, nothing immaterial, nothing beyond matter. You have no good and no evil. Here's another philosopher, Michael Roos, and he's really honest about this. You just this kind of candidness, this kind of honesty is hard to find. He wrote an article in The Guardian called "God is Dead, Long Live Morality." Okay? And here's what he says in the article: morality is just a matter of emotions, like liking ice cream and sex and hating toothache and marking student papers. He's a professor. He says, but it is and has to be a funny kind of emotion. It has to pretend that it is not that at all. If we thought that morality was no more than liking or not liking spinach, then pretty quickly it would break down. So morality has to come across as something more than emotion. It has to appear to be objective, even though it's really subjective. Now, he just used a couple terms there: subjective and objective. When we say that morality is subjective, what we're saying is the subject determines whether it's true or not. Okay? So, for example, some people like strawberry ice cream. But other people like vanilla or chocolate, okay? So the truth is determined by the subject. There's no objective nature to it. It's just determined by the subject. It just amounts, by the way, to preferences, likes and dislikes. That's why he said it's just a matter of emotion, like liking ice cream. That's what it comes down to. Now, I don't know if you're seeing the problem, but this actually becomes a huge problem for atheism. For example, I mean, he mentioned spinach a second ago. I'll talk about Brussels sprouts, okay? Imagine this conversation with an atheist. Imagine my atheist friend says, I can't believe in God. And you say, why not? And he says, well, Brussels sprouts. And you say, Brussels sprouts? What, I don't get it. What's wrong with Brussels sprouts? He says, have you ever tasted those things? I cannot believe in a God who would make something so distasteful to me. I can't believe in a God who would make something that I just dislike so much. Now, here's the problem. There are these strange people out there who actually like Brussels sprouts. Are there any of those people here? Wow. In Mattoon, that's where you guys are all hanging out. Now, here's the thing. I'm not talking about like wrapping a Brussels sprout in bacon, okay? Yeah, that's you liking bacon, not Brussels sprouts. There's a difference. I mean, like steamed Brussels sprouts on their own. Who? You're still gonna put your hand up for that? Shoot. We'll see if we can convert you before the end of this, okay? Now, again, if morality is just emotions, likes and dislikes, personal preference, then any time an atheist says, I can't believe in a God, and then they offer some evil, all they're giving us is Brussels sprouts. On their view, they say, murder or terrorism or abuse or injustice, those things really don't exist. You're just talking about your likes and dislikes. Because some people out there really do like those things, okay? And this is why they commit those atrocities. So, on atheism, right and wrong are just about personal tastes. There's nothing objectively wrong because there is no objective morality, just subjective morality. So, if these things are really evil, like abuse and racism and so on, there must be something that is outside of them, an objective moral standard that is beyond any individual or culture, beyond our likes and dislikes, beyond our personal preferences. And many people recognize that that objective standard, at least traditionally, has been a moral lawgiver, God. God is that moral standard. In fact, it's his very nature that is the standard. This is interesting because C.S. Lewis wrestled with this challenge. And in his book, Mere Christianity, which you guys sell, which, I mean, should be like standard reading. You got your Bible and you got, Mere Christianity or whatever. So it's just a great book arguing from morality to God, okay? And here's what he says in the book. Because C.S. Lewis used to be an atheist. By the way, we were talking about Jordan Peterson, and I made the comment that I really hope that Jordan Peterson is on a similar path as C.S. Lewis was on, because there was a lot of people having conversation with C.S. Lewis for a long time before he became a believer. And here's what Lewis says. My argument against God, as an atheist, was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. So he's arguing against God using the problem of evil. This is Stephen Fry, right? The world is so cruel and unjust. But then he says this, but how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing the universe with when I called it unjust? Of course, he says this, I could have given up my idea of justice by saying it was nothing but a private idea of my own. That's what these guys are doing. That's subjective. That's likes and dislikes. There really is no justice. There really is no injustice. This is just my own likes and dislikes. I could have gone that route. But then he says this, but if I did that, then my argument against God collapsed too. You can't argue against God because of your likes and dislikes. There's nothing to appeal to beyond yourself. So it's fascinating because you see this all over the place where Richard Dawkins, so I'll use Richard, he gets thrown around a lot in these conversations because he's so popular. But he says, we already read it, there's no justice, right? He says, the universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no purpose, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. He says, you're not going to find any justice at bottom. But this same guy writes another book called The God Delusion, where he's got a massive problem with the God of the Bible. In fact, he says it's the God of the Old Testament. He says the God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all of fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, and he goes on and on and on and on. Well, hold on a second, Richard. You already said there's no such thing as justice and injustice. So then what is your problem with God? Just that, are you just saying you don't like him? Because that's all your challenge ends up amounting to. This is against your own personal tastes. But who cares what your tastes are, right? So Dawkins has a problem. He wants to condemn the God of the Old Testament as unjust, when on the other hand say, oh, by the way, there is no just and unjust in this world. That is trying to have your cake and eat it too, okay? You can't say evil proves God does not exist, and then, oh, by the way, there is no objective good and evil. You can't use a thing you don't think exists, and so this is what he's trying to do. Now, I want to be clear here. I think Richard Dawkins and many others know right and wrong. I think they know good and evil. I'm not talking about knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong, okay? Someone might say, are you saying that the atheist cannot know that something's evil? I'm not saying that. Here's what I am saying. It's not about the knowledge. I think we all have God's moral law written on our heart. If you read Romans, you find out Romans 2, that our consciences are bearing witness to what's right and wrong. Here's the problem. They both know it's wrong to steal, lie, rape, and murder, and all those things. The problem is the atheist has no moral foundation to stand on to make those claims. So they can make the claim, but they have no basis. They can't account for good and evil, right and wrong, like the theist can. It's kind of like this. You can know what a book says while denying there's an author of the book. So let's say we got Green Eggs and Ham. I can read this book just fine and deny that Dr. Seuss even exists. I don't need an author. I can read this book just fine. The problem is there would be no book to begin with if there was no author, right? In a similar way, the atheist can say, I don't need God. I know good and evil. I know right and wrong just fine. Don't need your Bible. The problem is, there would be no right and wrong, good and evil to know in the first place if there was no author of morality, if there was no God. And I think that's their big problem. So I actually think that theism has all kinds of good arguments. You can argue for God from all kinds of different things. I actually think, and then the atheist will raise the problem of evil. I actually think the problem of evil is evidence for God, not against God. Because if there is evil in the world, then there must be a way to adjudicate between evil and good, which must mean there's a standard to adjudicate between those two things, an objective standard, and that objective standard is what we call God. That is his very nature, Where else are you going to get that standard? And we could talk about some of the other alternatives. So the first thing we spent a bit of time on there was evil is something. That means it's real. Evil is real. Here's the second thing, though. Evil is not something. What I mean by not something is it's not a thing that was created at the beginning, okay? This is a question that many have wrestled with, and Augustine actually talked a little bit about this, and he was responding to this kind of argument that says, well, if God created all things, and evil is a thing, then that means God created evil. And this, by the way, is Stephen Fry's objection. He kept saying, why, God, did you create a world so full of injustice and pain? Why did you make the world like this? And why did you create evil is essentially what he's asking. And I think this is something, one of the possible responses is we can go to the second premise and say, well, actually evil is not technically a thing. What is evil, if you think about it? What is evil? To kind of explain this, let me use an illustration using a donut and a donut hole. Now, I got to be careful because I think in the States, you guys have these balls that are called donut holes. Is that right? In Canada, we call these Timbits, okay, because we have this restaurant, or this place called Tim Hortons. Have you guys been to Tim Hortons? Anyone know what Tim Hortons is? You know, some of you? So when I say donut hole, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that, okay? I'm talking about that hole right there. Now, if I were to ask you, have you eaten a donut hole, and I'm talking about this donut, you would say no, right? Because the donut hole is where the donut ain't. I'm not going too quickly here, am I? Right? I know it's like we just had pizza, a lot of carbs. The donut hole is where the donut ain't, okay? The donut hole only exists as long as the donut exists, right? No donut hole. Okay. Now, I want you to think about goodness and evil this way. Because I actually think, and this is what some philosophers and theologians down through church history have argued, is that evil is actually, they call it a privation or an absence of that which is good. So you have this goodness that God creates, these good things, these good beings. And then when they don't operate in the way they're supposed to, they go wrong or they produce evil. It's a lack in goodness. And I actually think this is kind of how we talk. Think about like when someone is not being just, we would say, you're being unjust, right? We would speak of injustice or immorality. You're not being fair, you're being unfair, right? You speak of the lack in the good thing, the privation of the good thing. You're not being righteous, you're being unrighteous. You're not being honest, you're being dishonest. So I think when Fry asked that question, how dare you create a world in which is full of such misery that's not our fault? That's what he challenges God with. It's not right, it's utterly evil. First of all, where are you getting your standard for right and evil? And second, God didn't create that world. He made a good world that went wrong. And you just have to read the first page of the Bible to know what I'm talking about. It's not buried somewhere, in one of the minor prophets or something. This is right there, page 1. God makes the light good, 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 good. And then on the very end of the chapter it says, behold, he saw everything that he had made, and it was very good. So originally the world has no evil. It has no sickness and conflict and suffering and evil. Adam and Eve have a perfect relationship with each other, with nature, with their creator. But then something happens. On our worldview, you go to chapter 3, right? Just turn the page. You're in chapter 3 and you find out there's where the world goes wrong. There's where evil and suffering and injustice and cruelty come in to the world. Adam and Eve are in a beautiful garden, the Garden of Eden. They've given one single rule to follow, right? Don't eat from this tree. You can eat from every other tree. And as an apologist, you often get asked, why is the tree there? We could talk about possible responses to this. Why did God put the tree there to begin with? But what we know is they ate from the tree. They rebelled against the one command. They said, we don't need to listen to God. We can determine truth for ourselves. We can be as gods. And Adam and Eve broke the world. And this broken world, this current state of the world, is not the way God originally intended, but this broken world produces broken people and broken circumstances, broken relationships. And this is the world we live in. And so you got a very good world, and then you got a not good world, and it all happens right there in chapter 3. So why, it's fair to ask the question, why didn't God stop Adam and Eve from eating from the tree, from eating the fruit? This is the kind of questions, by the way, my kids ask. Usually when I'm so tired and I'm trying to put them to bed and they just want to keep me up because they want to stay up late. And so they ask me all these questions. And it's always the hardest questions that come from your 8-year-old, okay? Why didn't God stop them from eating from the tree? And this kind of leads to my fourth insight. So the first one is evil is real. And if evil it really is real, then you end up believing in God, okay? Because he becomes the standard. If evil, the second thing is evil is not just real, but it's not a thing, okay? It's not like a thing that God made at the beginning. Third, something good made evil possible. What do I mean by that? Something good made evil possible. Well, that's something I'm referring to is called moral freedom. We often talk about it, moral freedom. God made man with the ability to make choices. We make choices every day. Am I going to have the cheese or the pepperoni or the sausage, right? You guys made a choice. Now, we are not robots, okay? We're not machines. This is what I think separates us from the other creatures, right? God makes us special with this, to have this unique special relationship with him. And so I think our moral freedom allows for the possibility of evil. Just compare the relationship that I have with Siri and the relationship I have with maybe one of my daughters, like Jocelyn, okay? She's my middle, and she's very affectionate. Now, here's my relationship with Siri. Let's see, if I turn my do not disturb back to whatever here, let's see. Let me try this. Siri, oh, I just happened to be getting a call at this exact moment. Siri, who am I? Oh, she's going to do, well, let me try. Shoot, I'm not on the Wi-Fi. I think that's why. I've trained my phone. This is going to sound really weird. I get my phone to call me the love of her life, okay? She says, you're Tim, but I get to call you the love of my life. That's what Siri says. And it wrote on here, she did answer me, but she didn't say it out loud, which would have been really awkward. Okay. Now, the reason I've trained Siri to do that is because there's a difference between that and when I get home. So I get home tonight, probably late, so I'll see my girls in the morning, and they get so excited. When I come home, Daddy, I love you, and they just hang on to me, and I'm having to walk around with a kid kind of strapped to my leg, and that's real love. I don't put a gun to their head. My kids tell me they love me because they really do love me. Not because I've programmed them to say they love me. There's a difference, right? You guys understand that. That's what real love is. Now, I think something similar is going on with Adam and Eve. I think God made them a certain way, not as robots, but as moral creatures that had the freedom to disobey them. And that disobedience brought evil into the world as a consequence. I know we don't like to talk about consequences, but that was the consequence that happened. And they were warned, and yet they still disobeyed. You could think of it like this. When I was a teacher, I was at a particular school where I got called into a class. We call it an on-call period, where instead of being like getting a substitute teacher in the class, I worked at the school, but I had that period off. I'm filling in for another teacher. So I know the students, not really well, but I knew some of the students. I'm sitting at the teacher's desk. Students come funneling in, and one of the students comes in, big football guy. He's got a paperclip that he's kind of playing with. It's a true story. He goes and sits down. Actually, he sees me, knows I'm not the real his real teacher. So he says, "Hey, can I go to the restroom?" And I knew right away, if I let him go, I would never see him again, you know? And so I said, "No, get in here, let's go sit down." So he sits down, but he keeps putting his hand, "Can I go to the restroom? Can I go to the restroom?" Finally, I'm like, I got an idea. This is gonna be fun. I said, "Okay, I'll let you go if you can bend that paperclip into 3 shapes." And so the first shape, I'm like, "Okay, bend it into a square." And so quickly, you know, it kind of already had like corners in it. So he bent this thing into a square. Then I said, "Can you bend this thing into a circle?" And then he, you know, kind of had to, this took a bit longer because he had to work the corners out. Paperclip into a circle. Okay, now the whole class is watching. And they're like, is Mr. B gonna let this guy go? Like, seriously? Is it that easy? And then I said, "Okay, now I want you to bend it into a square circle." And he said, "Do you mean a half square, half circle?" I said, "No, a square circle." And I mean, this kid wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, but he was like, I don't think that's possible. And I said to him, "You're telling me with those big muscles you got there, you can't bend that puny paperclip into a square circle?" Now, of course, and the class was laughing at this point. They knew that power had nothing to do with accomplishing that task. It didn't matter if you had all the power in the world. Making a square circle is a logical impossibility because a square by definition has 490-degree corners and a circle doesn't. I actually think this relates to the challenge that we get here from with the problem of evil. If it's true that God has created creatures a certain way to have a certain kind of moral freedom, then it could be that if he wants to have those creatures, then all the power in the world isn't going to allow someone to forcibly, freely do something. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm forcing you to freely do something. There's a contradiction in terms, like a square circle. Could God, with his power, annihilate the evil in the world today? Absolutely. He could literally get rid of all of us. Problem solved, okay? But if he is committed to a certain kind of world with a certain kind of creatures, then power isn't the solution to this problem. Okay, like using your power to force people to choose certain decisions. Okay, that's not the solution. I actually think that's a false premise. If God is all powerful and committed to creatures, creating them to be a certain way, then maybe that won't eliminate the evil in the world. What about this first premise? If God is all good, he would want to eliminate the evil in the world. I actually think that's false too. It could be that a good God permits evil for some other good. And we all understand this in like kind of like the, I don't want to say trivial sense, but think about like when you take your kids to go get like, you know, a shot or something, like a needle. They look at you, especially when they're really small, like, what are you letting this guy do? Like, why are you allowing this to happen to me? I mean, I've been in situations where you have to like hold them down because they see it coming, you know? That is not a fun experience if you're a parent. And maybe you've been in those kinds of situations where we had one of our daughters. I was in California speaking. We rented a house, and it was like the night before we're leaving. And my daughter was 2 at the time, is bouncing on this ball in the garage while my wife was doing some laundry, falls forward, and the cement had this like lip that like near the foundation, slices her head wide open. Are you kidding me? So now we're going to the thing, and I'm telling you, it was not a fun experience getting stitches in her face, you know? And she didn't like it, but we weren't there because we were trying to help, not hurt, right? There was a good reason for us going there to the hospital or going to the dentist. You know, let's go to the dentist. For fun? No. No one likes that, but we go because there's a good reason to go. I actually think that we see this show up in Scripture all over the place. Genesis 50, verse 20. You know the story of Joseph. Joseph, son of Jacob, he's thrown into a pit by his brother, sold into slavery, all kinds of trouble. Like he even works his way up in Potiphar's house, and then Potiphar's wife falsely accuses him, gets thrown back in prison. I mean, it's just a nightmare situation for Joseph. And then after all that, Joseph is going to meet his brothers again. And he says this to them, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." What good? What good could come from all this suffering and injustice? Well, he says, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Like God rescues thousands of people through Joseph. And he gets there because of all this other stuff. We see it in the New Testament too, by the way. John 9, the disciples come across a blind man. They're like, "Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but the works of God might be displayed in him." Think about this. This guy endures a lifetime of blindness in the first century. That cannot be an easy life. And they're asking, well, why is he blind? Must be he sinned, maybe his parents sinned, that's why. Jesus says, no, here's why. It's so that I'm going to heal him and display my glory. And we think, man, that doesn't seem fair. That doesn't seem fair. But I actually think that our perspective is way too small when it comes to this stuff. Because yeah, a lifetime of blindness, it doesn't seem fair if life ends at the grave. But what if life doesn't end at the grave? What if life goes on into eternity? This guy gets healed, gives his life to Christ, goes on. What happens then? Well, that brief time of blindness in the first century, however many years it was, it pales in comparison to eternity. In fact, I think this is what Paul's getting at in 2 Corinthians when he says, "For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us the eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison." What kind of light momentary affliction is he talking about? If you guys know Paul's story, in 2 Corinthians it actually says this: "Far more imprisonments with countless beatings, often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews 40 lashes less 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship, through many a sleepless night, in thirst and hunger, often without food, and cold and exposure." He calls that a light momentary affliction. How? Is it because he's insane? No. It's because his perspective is like an eternal perspective, not a kind of temporal, looking at just my life in this moment, in this circumstance. In fact, it's important to remember, if Christianity is true, then our story our story isn't done at this moment in the suffering that we're going through. Sometimes, as a kid, when my kids were a little bit smaller, we'd read Snow White and some of these other stories where there'd be like this problem that needs to get solved, And in this particular story, Snow White, she bit the apple, she's sleeping, doesn't look good. And my girls would want to stop reading, or we're watching a movie, turn it off. They don't know that there's a happily ever after around the corner. And I think as Christians, we know that is around the corner. That's where we place our hope. By the way, there's all kinds of other reasons the scriptures talk about. Why is there suffering? Sometimes to test. That's what James 1 talks about. To build patience, character, and perseverance. That's Romans 5. To judge the wicked, the flood, right? That was suffering. That was judgment. Discipline, that's Hebrews 12. He also permits, though, evil and suffering in the world to warn the world. To warn the world of the impending judgment. What do I mean? Well, here's Jesus' response in Luke 13. See, a tower just fell on people and killed them, probably an earthquake. And it's like, wow, look at this evil and suffering that took place. And here's what happened. Jesus says, those 18 on whom the Tower of Siloam fell and killed them, do you think they were worse offenders than all the others who live in Jerusalem? Then he says this, no, I tell you, unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. So Jesus basically says that thing happened as kind of a warning so that you would repent of your sins. I like the way Lewis puts it in The Problem of Pain. He says, we can ignore pleasure, and we can. Pleasure's easy to ignore, but pain insists on being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It's his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. There's lots of people who end up turning to God because of the suffering and evil that they're presently experiencing. So, I know people at this church aren't going to be wondering this, but some people wonder, well, doesn't God just want to make us happy, right? And then they'll go to that famous passage, you shall be happy, for I am happy, in Second Opinions. No, that's not what it says, right? The goal isn't your happiness. The goal is actually your holiness. And the way you get to your holiness is sometimes through trials, sometimes it's through pain. That's just how it works. We all understand that. So I actually think this is that first premise, if God is all good, but he also is trying to create a certain kind of person, a sanctified person and so on, then he won't eliminate the evil in the world, okay? Okay, last thing, very briefly. Evil is solved by someone. Evil is solved by someone. Why doesn't God end the evil and the suffering right now? Let's say at 2 o'clock today. Where would any of us be at 2:01 if he eliminated all the evil and the suffering? And the problem is we would be eliminated, okay? In fact, G.K. Chesterton, he responded to an article in the newspaper that said, what's wrong with the world? And his opinion piece was very short. And it basically was, dear sirs, I am sincerely yours, okay? Because we don't just suffer evil and pain, but we produce it. We produce it. We're actually part of the problem, all of us. And so it's just fascinating that we always want to judge kind of the evil out there in the world, but we often need to look inside our own hearts because we are part of the problem. Now, the answer to the problem, the answer is actually God, okay? He's the solution. Specifically, we got God in Christ on a cross at Calvary. People ask, where was God, in this particular situation? And the answer is God was there in the thick of it. He was right there in the midst of suffering. God didn't remain distant and detached from evil and suffering. He came, second person of the Trinity, comes, incarnation, right? This is John chapter 1, and he takes on human flesh. And what does he do? He experiences the suffering and the evil in the world and actually dies in our place. Why? So that we would receive mercy instead of justice. We would receive forgiveness instead of being condemned. There's a day coming in the future when there will be an end to all the evil and suffering in the world. And Peter talks about this being a day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. It's not going to be pretty. When atheists ask God to end all the evil in the world, they actually don't know what they're asking for, because they would be exchanging kind of this temporal suffering and pain in this world for what I believe to be eternal suffering in the next. Of course, God doesn't want that. Peter says that the Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness. He's patient towards you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance. And so why didn't God end the suffering, right now? And the answer, at least part of the answer, is that he's patient. He's patiently waiting so that more people will turn to him, so he can show them mercy instead of the justice that is deserved. So people think that you get rid of God and somehow that solves the problem of evil. I can't believe in a God of love, goodness, power, all these things because of the evil in the world. So let's get rid of them. The problem is, when you get rid of God, you actually don't get rid of the problem. You're still left with all the suffering and evil in the world. What you have eliminated is hope. You get rid of God, you eliminate hope. I mean, as Christians, we have hope in the midst of our suffering, don't we? In Lamentations, which is not a book that typically gets read, it's this small little book in the Old Testament. It's Jeremiah lamenting the destruction of Judah and Jerusalem. And right in the middle of this book, it's fascinating. It seems like everything is hopeless. In fact, if you were just to back up, I think to verse 21, or maybe it's verse 20, Jeremiah pretty much says it's hopeless. And then you get these words right in the middle of this book, and it's words that we sing in some of our hymns. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. This is in the midst of all the suffering. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. There's a lot of people, and they're angry about evil. And they should be. It's a foreign thing to our world. It shouldn't be here. It's not the way God had made the world. But instead of hating God, which a lot of people do, I think you could sense the hate in Stephen Fry's voice when he was railing against God. We don't hate God. What we do is we hope in God and hate the sins that produced all the suffering and turn to the one who's the ultimate source of hope, Jesus Christ. It is 1:30, and I want to make sure you guys get some questions after, but we're going to take a little break. And maybe you can be thinking about some of the ideas. You might have some questions related to this. We do have one more session, I promise. This was heavy. The next session is going to be a little bit more fun and games, okay? But let's take a break. We got 15 minutes. We'll be back at 1:45 for our last session together, followed by a little bit of Q&A, all right? We'll see you in a minute.